Hey, Voodoo Power listeners. Before we start the show, let me tell you about Strength Coach Pro. Strength Coach Pro is the ultimate coaching companion for passionate strength coaches. Strength Coach Pro is a powerful platform allowing coaches to sequence programs for an entire year, ensuring athletes stay on track. It features a simple drag and drop design for program building. It's easy and efficient, allowing for customized workouts. Another great feature of Strength Coach Pro is the real-time leaderboard feedback. Athletes love competition, creating a fun, engaged, and motivated environment where they can thrive. Strength Coach Pro is trusted by coaches at all levels, from professional to D1, high school, and professional trainers looking for an easy way to streamline programming needs. Whether working with 10 clients or 1,000 athletes, there are no limits to the support of this program. In addition, there's a 14-day trial for coaches where they can explore the platform for themselves. At just $50 a month or $500 a year, the value is unbeatable. Please don't miss your opportunity. Coaches can reach out to Strength Coach Pro for a demo today. Let them work to save you time and elevate your coaching. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates of Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Tyler Franklin. Coach Franklin is the Director of Athletic Performance at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky. Franklin is the NHSSCA State Director from Kentucky, and in 2023, he was named Kentucky Strength Coach of the Year. Coach Franklin has a bachelor's degree in exercise science from Freed-Hardeman University, and Coach Franklin has a National High School Strength Conditioning certification. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, appreciate you having me, man. Thanks for reaching out. It's an honor to get to know you and hopefully answer some questions you got. Maybe one person will learn something from this.
Every time I put them out, that's all the hope is. We kind of got to meet off Twitter. We have a mutual friend in Ross Garner, and somehow we got tagged in a few posts. So that led me down the Tyler Franklin rabbit hole of stuff that you post. So here we are. The one thing that is not strength and conditioning related that I kind of learned about you doing all this research is that you play a lot of music. So you're from Kentucky, Tennessee. So without being stereotypical, what is it you play?
Man, I'm not your typical country guy. I love rock and roll, and whenever I was going through my phase of playing music on the weekends, we just do a bunch of covers. So whenever I'm playing in front of people, I like playing music that gets people dancing out there in the crowd. But if I'm writing my own stuff or just playing for myself, it's probably going to be some rock and roll or some really catchy pop music.
Do you have a genre you prefer, or a year, a decade?
No, man, that's tough. I love music, and I'm one of those that, like, I can pick one or two things out of a song and it makes me a sucker for that song, even if it's a trash song. If it's produced well and just little tidbits here that catch my ear, I don't have a specific genre, man. I love it all. There's good music everywhere. Sometimes you just got to dig for it, especially this day and age.
Well, we'll get out in the gym, and I got a couple kids that love to play the song game. So they'll find a playlist, they'll turn it on. You get 1 point for the song. And originally they just did the song title, and I'm like, well, that's not really right. You gotta know the artist. When I was a kid, it didn't matter if you knew the song title if you didn't know who sang it.
Exactly.
They can't put that together. That it wasn't a YouTube search away. You had to know a little bit of information. So we'll get the rolling in sets, and we'll get to play in the song game. So I figured I would ask about that.
Yeah, man, I'm a big sucker for music. It's how I met my wife. She plays. She's been playing longer than me. She sings, so she's a lot more talented than I am.
Well, I enjoyed playing a little bit when I was younger, but life happened and got busy and had other things that were more important, so I kind of moved away from it. But I always enjoy going out and listening to it.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for live music as well, man.
It makes for a good time. I don't get out and do it like I used to. It just seems like once you get to be a certain age, you're old, tired, and I've kind of turned into an introvert. So I'd rather stay home.
I feel that, man. It's about bedtime by the time they get to kicking off shows, so I'm ready to be in bed by then.
Well, and then
somewhere along the way, I turned into a sucker for vinyl. So I started buying records, and then my grandpa just passed, and we were picking up his garage and all of that, for my grandma so she can move. He had an old tube set up.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knew about. And so I pulled it down. It was up in the rafters. I pulled it down. I'm like, I'll take it home. And if it's broke, I'll just get rid of it. But if it works, and it worked. And
I'm sure it sounds amazing.
Oh.
Yeah. Good for you.
Well, I know everybody listening doesn't probably really care about any of that stuff, but I wanted to talk to you about it. So I've listened to a lot of your stuff, and so without going down all the same rabbit holes that you've been down before, there was one I heard, and it created an interesting conversation. And I think we've kind of worked through it with wrestlers a lot, but sandbag work. You can hit a lot of ollie style movements. You can hit a lot of power developed movements. You can do so much with it. You can drag it. You can throw it. You guys were discussing that on there a little bit. You didn't get way in depth, but do you do much sandbag work?
Not with my classes, and that's what I would love to. I would love to start incorporating that. The only holdup is just funding for that, and then funding for the different weights. Sandbags not as easy to put plates in and plates off to load that up. There's one of my good friends, Jamie Dixon. He owns a private facility in Florence, Alabama. He does a lot of really good sandbag training with his clients. I do it with my private clients, but I haven't incorporated any with my class just because it's hard to do that with 40 kids in there at a time. And like I said, it's not easy to load up weight in those. And, but maybe one day I'll have the funding to supply each rack with that, because, I love it. Like you said, that we do some ollie type movements. I've got a 11-year-old roper. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. And we do a form of like cleans with the sandbag, because it emulates him flanking a calf. Uh, uh, and I've got a shot put and discus thrower that we do sandbag stuff with her, and they love it. Just the stability point of it, and a lot of uneven movements that they're having to stabilize. Instead of putting a barbell in their hands, a sandbag, and they look really smooth from a clean movement standpoint. And eventually, when I will put a barbell in their hands for that movement, I think it'll be pretty nice just to see how much they already know just from flipping the sandbag.
The instability of it, how the weight changes on how you grab it, all the things that go into it, definitely mimics some different approaches. Wrestlers, calf ropers. It definitely changes the stimulus quite a bit.
Whenever I was telling my roper's mom about it and showing her like what the movement is, I mean, she freaked out. She's like, "That looks just like he's flanking a calf." And I'm like, "That's my sport specific training for you, I guess."
Well, and depending on how in depth you want to get, a lot of sandbags have mini sandbags inside of them, so you can load them up. You can end load them. You can balance them. You can do whatever it is you want to do to make one end heavier.
Currently, with my 11-year-old, I think we have 40 pounds is what we're using for his cleans with that, and then I think we got 50 more pounds that we can add in, and I think there's another little 30 sandbag that we can put in there. Eventually, we'll get to that, but I'm in no rush with him.
With wrestlers, we used to almost throw in a snatch variation, so that they would actually throw it. They would throw it and then step out from underneath it. So,
nice.
The problem is we always did it outside, because if one of them busts, you're going to spend all day cleaning up sand.
Yeah.
So you're a baseball guy as well. You spent a lot of your personal career playing, coaching, involved with baseball.
Yeah, I grew up playing baseball and football in high school, and then I went to college on a baseball scholarship. And then I was our GA at Freed-Hardeman after I graduated. I was coaching baseball, the pitching coach, and then I was running the strength program for our baseball team and soccer and girls soccer and then softball. But I mean, at that point, I knew that I didn't want to coach a sport. After that, it was just I had spent so much time growing up, and I had gotten into music at that point. So and the only reason I really coached a sport after that is because I knew it would help me get a job. Uh, Not saying I didn't enjoy it, but it definitely a lot of burnout happening. So I think that's why I stayed at the middle school and younger age because there wasn't as much time involved in coaching the actual sport as there was with the high school. Uh, but yeah, a lot of my background is in baseball, and I've coached just about every freaking sport there is. But I haven't. It's been 7, 8 years since I've coached a sport, and it's been pretty nice.
It gets to be a lot on top of everything else you're doing.
It's a lot, and like you truly have to love it to stick with it because the pay isn't great for it, and if you want to be good at it, you have to put the time in. And I liked making money in other places and having my personal time, family time. So I'm I'm grateful what baseball has led me to and uh, what it's presented to me. But I'm glad that I haven't coached in a while.
Now, you spent time at the college level, strength conditioning and coaching, and you decided you didn't want to coach, but you still enjoy the strength conditioning. What made you move from the college level back to the high school level?
Well, like I said, the only time I spent at the college level was when I was a GA for 2 years, and essentially that's what led me to teach PE out of college. Was I knew that I did not want to stay at the college sector, whether that was coaching a sport or being strength coach. So I went. I didn't know that being a strength coach at the high school level was a thing. Uh, Social media wasn't very big back then, so like I didn't have any insight of what that looked like. So I got my PE degree and was looking for a PE job because I wanted to make money. I needed a job, and like we had discussed, even then it took me a year and a half before I could find an actual teaching job. So I worked industrial construction with my dad. Had almost signed up to go teach English in South Korea, and then finally got a teaching job in the States. So I've been PE since then, and doing some private training on the side. And I would, whatever sport I coached, I would run strength programs for those teams. And I did that for 8 years. And finally, something came open here at Murray that my principal that I'm with currently had a vision of. He knew my background was strength and conditioning and exercise science. And he reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in running this class at Murray that he was creating. So we sat down and discussed what that looked like, and I've been at Murray for the past 6 years.
I have a few different questions going two different directions here. So we'll hit one first, and then we'll come back and grab the other. Me and you had talked about this, and then you just brought it up. You were in industrial construction. I've spent a lot of my life in industrial construction. I think that gives a unique perspective when you come back to the high school level, when you start dealing with kids. You've spent a lot of your career dealing with some very hard individuals, with some very difficult individuals. So when you come back and you start working with kids, it seems like maybe it's a lot easier. Did you find that?
Yeah, especially like working with my dad. We were on the road. There's some unique characters in that type of work. Like man, you got some hard heads in there, and some guys that just don't want to listen. And then you're also dealing with engineers who, like, on paper everything looks good, and then they get there and stuff isn't fitting the way it's supposed to, and then just a lot of different unique heads colliding. So coming back, it was almost a breath of fresh air getting back into teaching after being out 2 years. Uh, so yeah, it was nice. I mean, I can't tell you how many interviews I had at Skype interviews. I was trying to find a job wherever. and everybody's like, you need to sub to get your foot in the door. And I'm like, I can't afford to sub and hope that they call me on a day. So I mean, I was lucky enough that my dad he was a crane operator for a long time, and I mean, I worked in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then Jonesboro for those time stints and made really good money. And it was really hard work, but I was grateful to get back into teaching when I finally got a teaching gig.
That's the one thing I noticed about having this gym out here and dealing with kids is it is a breath of fresh air. Getting away from the trades just for a little bit, and
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say I wasn't hard to deal with too. There was a lot of maturity that came. It makes it easier to deal with some of the kids when at least they don't know better. Now, the other part of that question, you talked about going to Murray and you did the job interview, and there was kind of a vision already laid out when you got there. So now you have to mesh your ideas with somebody else's vision. You guys have made it work, but how difficult is it at that time creating your own thing when there's already kind of a vision in place?
So up at that point, I had done middle school PE for 8 years, I guess. Uh, and I had no clue what running like an actual strength and conditioning class looked like at the high school sector. And I don't think my principal did at the time. And the reason that, so they had their 7th hour athletic block, and we came in together. It was his first year, the year that he hired me on. And I guess it was just chaos with these kids they weren't in season, and they were kind of just doing whatever they wanted from what I've been told. That I mean, especially like the sports that were fall sports and their season ends. So these seniors that don't have any sport to go to, they were just doing whatever they wanted. So I think that's kind of why he wanted to start the class that I'm teaching now, is to kind of cut down on the chaos of those kids that were just running rampant. Uh, so I mean, he just created the class, and he's been a blessing because he's kind of just let me run with it, and he doesn't have suggestions on anything. I mean, like a good leader does, he hired me and let me, do my job. He just said, this is what it will look like 5 days a week. You'll have them 50 minutes a day. You'll have them all year. And there's been some changes here and there, nothing crazy, but uh, he pretty much just lets me do my job. He doesn't question what I'm doing in there, completely trust. And uh, there's been a lot of, on my end, like learning and changing things, screwing things up. But I think we're in a good spot now. Of course, I mean, it's ever evolving. That's any job, but uh, I have a pretty sweet gig, and I'm grateful for him and the opportunity he's let me have.
I'd heard you mention that on other podcasts. You have about 50-minute class period, which, when they change, you have the warm up. Time's pretty short. So these athletes that are wanting more, how do you help them? Do you direct them to do some private stuff? Do you help them in their own time? Do you think what you're doing is enough? How do
I
you,
I think I definitely think what we're doing is enough, especially with this day and age where even if kids are only playing one sport, they're playing no telling how many club games or travel games on the weekend. On top of that, I rarely have athletes that play a sport for me or for our school that want or need more. Uh, I mean, it's truly just showing up and stacking quality days. I mean, I've got some kids that will have me for 4 years, and the amount of volume that they've obtained and the training age that they've obtained in those 4 years is a pretty big jump. Now I've had some students that have reached out that want private training on the side, uh, and it's nice because I'm able to communicate with myself as far as like not overfilling buckets. Uh, but the athletes or students that I have, It's rare that they're reaching out and wanting more because they've got so much more on their plate as far as the sport they're playing and the travel clubs they're playing with. So, uh, I just try not to kill them every freaking week. Now, I mean, if they're truly playing one sport, there's a time to go see God and stress a little bit. Uh, but for the most part, they're coming in every day, 5 days a week. They see me for a whole year. Some of them that I'll train during the summer. I mean, that's 4 years of coming in every day, which is when you look back, it's pretty freaking impressive that they've, the consistency if you just show up and do the work.
Listening to you talk in some other podcasts, I think maybe we live in kind of the same area, very small school, very small high school. To have these sports, kids have to participate. So you've got kids that never leave a sport. They're always doing something. How do you manage that? They're always in a season. That's always the question. How do you help with kids that are always in a season? Do you just do your thing, or do you adjust for that? What do you have to do in that setting?
Communication is key, and knowing your students. If you've got a good relationship with these kids and you know that they're going to be honest with you and you know them well enough to know when they're dragging, like what's happening. Yeah, definitely I adjust. I mean, what's 1 or 2 days of minimizing our volume or minimizing our intensity in the grand scheme of things to help them recover? Uh, and I can tell all these kids till I'm blue in the face, like, you need to not play this weekend. They're still going to go play. Like, so I'm not going to be stingy and say like, nope, you played this weekend. We're still going to stick to the plan, and this is what we're doing. Because, like I said, in the grand scheme of things, what's 1 or 2 days of minimizing some stuff, or even just telling them, hey, you need to just walk in the gym today instead of coming in the weight room, or instead of doing sprints. Uh, but just like I said, communicating and making sure you know each of your athletes. Now you'll have those kids that where you feel like every day they've got something going on. Like, then obviously I'm like, it's always something with you. Like, just get in here and do the work. Like, sometimes life, like, you're not just going to get to do what you want. So we need to build a little more discipline because it's always something with you. Now those kids are a little few and far between, but for the most part, just communicate, get to know your students, athletes, and adjust as need. Because, like I said, 1 or 2 days isn't going to hurt anything after 4 years with me.
The one thing I do know from living in a small town, small community, small high school, is there will always be an idea that popularity has to do with playing time or things like that. How do you overcome that with your athletes in the weight room? Like, this directly ties to that more so than your popularity ties to it. How do you get that idea conveyed?
What do you mean, like them getting playing time because they're popular?
Yeah. I've always heard that in a small town. Well, so and so plays because their mom and dad do this, their mom and dad do that. But that same kid's not in the weight room, not putting in the extra work. How do you tie that together? Like, hey, playing time actually has more to do with what you're doing away from the sport than what your parents' last name is.
I use sarcasm really well. I'm not afraid to call out students because I expect them to do the same with me. Uh, but especially if they're not that talented in the first place, like, you just have to hammer, like, working hard is the reason that they're playing and you're not. Like, I remember having a conversation with one of my students saying, well, this kid quit because that coach played favorites. And I'm like, I play favorites. You know who my favorite students are? Athletes, the one that show up, work, communicate. They're honest with themselves. They're honest with me. I think it's silly that if a coach says they don't have favorites, like, I have favorite students, I have favorite athletes, and it tends to be the ones that show up and put the work in. Uh, so I use sarcasm really well. I'm not afraid to call out students for being lazy. Uh, Now you have to know the time and a place to call them out. whether that's in front of a group or it's not, or just a private conversation that, hey, like, you're wanting to be here and nothing that you're doing right now backs up those goals that you have. So you need to start being honest with yourself if you're really wanting to get that playing time or if you're wanting to play at the next level, because nothing you're doing suggests any of those goals you have. I think there's a fine line of going too far and whether or not calling them out in front of a group of people is needed at that time or having that private conversation with them. I can't imagine there are too many coaches that are playing athletes just because their parents did this or their parents did that. I mean, for the most of the coaches that I've interacted with, like, they want to win just as much as anybody. Like, it's not all about winning, but you want to put your best people on the court, the field. So it's just silly. I think it's a form of self protection for some of these kids. Like, I would be playing, but and that's also why I don't work very hard, because it doesn't matter if I work hard. All right.
That's an incredibly interesting point. Yes, it's a protection mechanism in a lot of athletes. Like you said, well, I can always use this excuse and have something where if I throw it all out there and I still fail, that's on me.
Yeah.
So
And adults do that too. It's just an ego thing.
yes, and getting kids to understand, well, what if you did put a little bit more in, what would happen? Sometimes that works. Sometimes they just always hang on to that excuse in their back pocket.
Yeah. Some kids are just lazy. Adults are lazy. But I want to try to teach that, like, hard work doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful. Like, but the work is the reward. You're going to learn something along the way, and it's okay to bust your butt to try to get somewhere and still fail. Like, there's always going to be lessons to be learned, but if you can just show up and put the work in, I mean, that is the reward.
The other similarity we have on top of everything we've discussed so far is a small room. I started in a very, very small room. I don't know if you've increased since what I've listened to, but you have a small room. So the understanding the pitfalls of the room and keeping the flow moving, how big of a learning curve was that?
It was a big learning curve. Like, I'm sure you've heard the other podcast when I first started. Like, I thought I was amazing trying to write a program for every sport here. In a small school, you have a lot of athletes that are playing multiple sports, so it was silly. And uh, everything that I program is based on logistics. I'm still in the same size weight room, uh, but I mean, every single thing is all right. Whenever I program, I'm going to have someone in the rack. There's going to be someone between the racks. We'll have this space in the middle for this. And if I can't find a movement pattern for each of those spaces, then that movement pattern isn't going to get put down for that mesocycle or macro cycle. I mean, I recently took up my landmines. We had landmine attachments on all of our racks, and I took all of them up. They're sitting here in my office because by the time that the landmines were out, like, we had zero space in the middle of the room. And I love landmines, but logistically, I don't have the space to do any landmine work.
No, we always talk about the pitfalls. We hit some of them there, but there are benefits to a small room as well. Have you found any benefits in having a smaller space?
You're in there and you've got to be mindful. It's teaching awareness to most students, hopefully. They're getting to know each other a lot more. Like, I don't have teams in there together. I have a bunch of different teams, a bunch of different athletes from different teams in there. Uh, I don't assign racks anymore. I did that the first 2 years where I tried to assign each student to a rack depending on their strength size, and uh, got an email from a parent about me putting his son at a rack with girls. I was like, well, your son needs to get stronger and he won't be at that rack anymore. But ever since then, I let them pick what rack they want to be at, and I know if there's different strength levels at that rack, they need to be on it as far as switching the weight, not be lazy. And it's been great. It's amazing how much more fun training can be when they're with people that they want to be with. Uh, I haven't found too many other benefits to a small room, not with that many kids. What do you think? What are the benefits that you got?
I think you nailed them. That's almost exactly what I would have said. It builds a really tight knit community and team. Everybody has to participate. You can't hide in a corner. Everybody has their job to do. I would have agreed almost 100% with what you said. If you're looking at building a unit that works well together, a small room is great for that. Now it limits what you can do, how you set up your warm-ups. You can't take a rack up for a warm-up if you got other kids coming through, if you're running in cycles, whatever the case may be. So you have to be pretty smart on how you want to set it up. But as far as community goes, I think a small gym definitely builds that. Now, is there other benefits? I don't know. You're not going to sprint in there. You're not going to do a whole lot of jumping in there. So you really have to work out the logistics, which makes it tough some days.
It has helped me. I think a lot more as far as what I'm programming, made me be a better coach. Dig a little deeper for some movement patterns that we can do in there and still get work done. So I do think it's made me a better coach having a small weight room space. Uh, but like I said, I have our main basketball gym, and my principal lets me run in this huge hallway that's 50 yards long. So I'm blessed. I mean, the weight room's small, but I mean, I've got 9 racks in there. We've got just about anything you need in the weight room, and our other space in the gym and the hallways. It's really nice. I have a nice setup, as much as I like to complain about the weight room.
It can always be worse, right?
It can always be worse.
Now, in that small setup, we've kind of hit on a few of these different ideas, but you have kids playing multiple sports, kids playing different sports, some kids not playing a sport at all. You run one program for the group. How do you adjust the volume and intensity for your JV players, your kids out of season, and your starters? Does that look different, or are they all still somewhat the same?
All that just depends on their game day. Again, getting to know the students and athletes and how they feel. I use I think it was Cody Hughes that came up with the stoplight system uh, as a guide. Now, when these kids are seeing me all year, that I have very few of them that actually adhere to the stoplight system now, because they come in there and they still get their work in. The intensity is, for the most part, I trust the intensity. If I walk over and I see them not moving as much weight as they should be, or hitting velocity zone that they should be in, then I'll be like, hey man, you're stronger than that. But having that open line of communication, how they feel, knowing their game schedule if they're in season, knowing if they don't have anything on the docket, if they're not playing another sport at the time, then okay, we need to ramp it up just a little bit. Like, soreness is not the goal, but sometimes we need to push that limit just a little bit, especially if we don't have any games that we're worried about. Uh, and I've also had kids that have played 2 or 3 games in a row, and they come in and we're running our sprints, and they set PRs, and they talk about how I don't feel very good today. My legs are tired. And I suggest, all right, well, let's just go through our warm up. Let's go about 75. Let's work on technique today. And if you want to run, you can. You don't have to. And they end up running and setting PRs on some of the fly 10s. So it's just a matter of knowing your kids and knowing, what their limits are, and when they need to dial back and when they need to ramp it up. I guess that just comes down to a coach's eye and knowing each individual student, like I've been saying over and over.
That is the benefit of a small school, is
Yeah.
You do know them all. There's not trying to guess their name throughout the whole period of class, or pulling somebody aside saying, what's their name? So yeah, a small school definitely creates that atmosphere where you definitely know what's going on with them.
And I feel like I've got a pretty good relationship with all the coaches here. I may get a text that says, "Hey, so and so had a pretty rough game last night. Just keep an eye on them." I don't ever have a coach texting me saying, "Hey, don't let them do this or do this." I mean, they at this point in the game, they trust my judgment that I'll do what's best for their athletes. So I think that speaks volumes. So I mean, I've been here 6 years. It was a little different when I was starting out, but for the most part, all the coaches trust me and trust that what I'm doing is going to benefit their athletes and not put them behind the eight ball.
Working with coaches and setting things up can present its whole new challenges on top of what you're trying to do. So you're trying to get athletes ready for them, and you're hoping that the coach doesn't go against what you're trying to do. So balancing those relationships and building those relationships, how is that developed for you, especially in a small school setting?
Uh, Same way with my students, getting to know them and knowing how they run their practices and what they did at their practices. It's helped a ton, and just knowing them on a personal level outside of just coaching. Uh, but I mean, I talk to them. I talk to the players. The amount of volume. Now we don't have any GPS units, so I don't know what kind of volume they're doing at practice. But I know kids can handle a lot more than we think they can. Because I mean, they did it before we had GPS tracking. Uh, my first 3, 4 years here, I was all gung ho about all the KPIs I kept up with, and I realized not many coaches care about the KPIs I keep up with like I do. Okay, yeah, they're getting faster. Cool, cool. Yeah, they're getting stronger. But the main thing that they want is everything we do. They want them to be better at their sport. So I think I do a good job of if they're taking care of their skill work, then everything that we're doing in my class, they're going to get better at their sport. But if you suck at your sport, not much that I'm doing is going to make you any better at your sport if you don't put any time into the skill work. So I think for the most part, all the coaches know that they still have to take care of their skill work, and ultimately, if they do that, what I'm doing is going to get them better at their sport.
Now I've been keeping up with a little bit of your Twitter posts, so these questions will kind of come maybe from that. But there is a capacity an athlete has to have to play their sport. So balancing the conditioning aspect of strength and conditioning with speed and with the KPIs you're measuring. And like you said, kids can handle more than what we think. How do you balance that out?
Well, any type of conditioning that we do in my class, it's going to be pretty low intensity. I think we need to hammer a lot of the parasympathetic to where, I mean, the body doesn't know the difference in the stress that's put on it, whether the kid is not sleeping, whether the kid is, dealing with family stuff. So any type of conditioning that we do is going to be pretty low intensity to try to hopefully get them back in a stress-free state. Uh, and there are times when we're doing tempo work or our cardiac output circuits that some of these kids probably are not used to hearing like, "Hey, slow down just a little bit." But just reminding them like, I'm not killing you when we're doing these tempo works. I'm trying to get you a little more efficient at recovering from these high intensity bouts that you've got. Uh, Again, being mindful of their game schedule, how many games they've got going on. Like I used to be that coach that was like, if you're not in the high school season, if you're not playing a high school game, then your travel stuff doesn't matter. And I've changed my perspective on that because it does matter. Like I said, their body doesn't know the difference in a high school game and a travel game. So I'm a lot more cognizant and lenient on, all right, we probably don't need to sprint today since you played 6 travel games this weekend. You know what? Instead of doing our tempos at this heart rate today, I just want you to walk while everybody else is doing tempos. Uh, but most of the conditioning I'm prescribing is low intensity to help recover from these high intensity bouts and build a little wider aerobic base so we can repeat these outputs. And I try my best to explain that to my athletes and my students. Whether or not they listen, I don't know. Uh, but I always tell them if they have questions about anything that I'm prescribing or programming, like I love talking about it. So like, don't be afraid to ask questions because I mean that's how you're going to learn. I hope it answered the question.
I think it did, but it also opened up a new set of questions. There's a love-hate relationship with competitive sports. But for the athlete, most of them, if they are going to be recruited, it's going to be recruited from the competitive side, unless it's football. So being a strength conditioning coach at school and you understand that opens up new communications with athletes, and then you can respect what they're doing outside of school. Did that take a little while to get to that point?
As far as dealing with like travel and stuff like that,
Yeah.
it did, man. Like I said, it those first 3 years, I was just a hardo saying like, all right, well, our high school season is not in session right now, so I don't really care that you play travel this weekend because it's not affiliated with our high school. So we need to be doing what I'm prescribing and we need to do it to the max amount and full effort. And I mean, it really didn't get me anywhere. And it's like these kids are still run down from the weekend. Uh, and I think it's helped a lot, like showing them that I care enough that because whether I want to like accept it or not, travel is a huge part of high school sports today. I don't agree with it, but I can still do my part to make sure that these athletes are their best for me, for their club teams, and for their high school teams here. Uh, and I mean, I tell them all the time, like you can't control what happens to you, but we can control how we react to it. So I just, you know, practice a little bit what I've been preaching to them, and knowing that we can adjust. All right, we're run down. We'll do this instead. Like we can always do something. And I let them know that sitting is not the answer. You sit for 6, 7 hours of your day. Like, don't expect to just come in here and sit. Like, we're gonna do something. I'm not gonna kill you. We're not gonna like go all out. Like 100% every day looks different, but there's always something we can do to move the needle just a little bit. And I think recognizing that has helped my program here, and it's helped a lot of athletes, you know, trust in me and I guess buy into what we're doing here.
That was the next question I was going to have. How has that change and how you view it created a better relationship slash trust with your athletes?
Oh, I mean, it's been a game changer just knowing that they can come and talk to me. I feel like I'm a pretty approachable guy, and hey, coach, I did this last night. My knee's doing this. Uh, what do you want me to do instead? And I always commit them like because it's not always easy, especially if they're competitive, telling me that they need some stuff modified. So uh, it's helped leaps and bounds, just letting them know and reiterating like we can always do something. You got an injured ankle, you still got one good leg and an upper body. Like they know coming in, for the most part, most of them that there's something to be done, and I don't want them to sit because rarely is just sitting down during my class ever the answer. Because, like I said, they've been sitting all freaking day in class. So we're gonna get some blood flow. We're gonna move, and hopefully, uh, get you back to feeling good.
With that being said, in your space, small group of students, you got kids playing competitive stuff. Your population dictates what you can actually do and how you do it.
Yeah.
How long did that take to understand that while you may be sailing the ship, if the crew's in different spots, it's going to be hard to get to where you're going?
Like I said, it was the first 2 or 3 years. After my first year, or I guess that second semester, my first year, COVID hit, and we were not in person. And then when we came back, it was off and on again as far as in person. So COVID kind of helped me navigate some of that, and it just getting to know these students and know that like it isn't always going to be what I want, and that, but we can all, like I said, we can always do something. Uh, and for the most part, these kids they need the same thing. They need the basics drilled over and over. And I think a lot of coaches fail because there's so much with social media out there. There's so much that you can get like caught and say, "Oh, that looks really cool. I wish I could start doing that," or "I'm going to start doing that," without any context. And I think even at the college sector, man, if you're just hammering the basics over and over again in some form or fashion, these athletes are going to thrive. And I've said it a million times, like we're not sending a ton of kids to go play college sports here at Murray High. And the ones that do end up going, they most of them are not playing 4 years. So my main thing and my mindset has shifted on that is like I just want to teach these kids that a lot of progress can be made if you show up and you take care of yourself and play sports, do active things, take care of your body, and hopefully I'm giving them an outline of what to do when they're outside of high school and like in the real world, and being able to take care of their bodies, because not everybody's going to play sports for the rest of their life.
As I went through this, I've had to change my mind multiple times with athletes and listen to you talk about it. You kind of been there yourself. I found that one program worked really well for me in adjusting it. I love specificity. I think we all do. It's fun to work with. It's fun to throw in there, but most of the athletes walking through the door weren't really ready for it. So we just hammered the basics, like you said. I think sometimes we can chase a carrot way too quick.
I agree. I agree. And like you said, like the specific stuff, I think there's a time and a place. Rarely do we ever get there, and rarely do athletes ever need that more than they need just hammering these basic movement patterns and learning how to move well, and then go like work on actual skill work that's going to transfer. Uh, I mean, you see professional athletes that are doing the same movement patterns and they just get really good at them. So it's a lot of not only convincing like these athletes that we deal with, but more so their parents. Like you don't have to you don't have to be doing all this sport specific stuff. Like these professional athletes, for the most part, you see some pretty crazy stuff that some of them do. But for the most part, like show up, do the basics well, and go practice and get better at your sport.
I've listened to you talk about planning your week and how you schedule out your athletes, and you've moved your max velo day to a Tuesday, and Monday's almost like a ramp up recovery from the weekend, get them ready for the school week. When did you notice that was the best course of action for you?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I have switched. I have switched this semester. For the past 2.5, 3 years, we've done weight room Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday kind of being our international bench press day, overhead press day, and then Tuesdays are max velo. I've switched my format this semester to where we're in that weight room every day. We come in Monday and we do our max velocity day now. We'll do our long fly tens, and then we'll go to the weight room and we'll do our squat pattern, bilateral movement right now. Tuesday, we do our bench press, and then we go to the gym and do our slow, low intensity tempo work. Wednesday, we do some multi-directional speed stuff, change the direction, and then we go to the weight room and do RDLs. And then Thursday, we start with pull-ups and we have some overhead press. And then we come and do our cardiac output circuit. And then Friday, we're in the weight room for about 20, 25 minutes, bending our spine, working on a hip flexor stuff. And then they have about 20 minutes to play spike ball, basketball, foursquare. And so far it's been a big shift as far as it's helped me mentally. And I think it's helped the kids a ton too, knowing that we're either doing lower body this day or upper body this day. And so far I've been liking it, man. I ran into this past semester where I was just driving myself crazy. A couple lazy kids in my class were just ruining it mentally for me. You get that point where it would happen once or twice a year for me where I just would drive myself crazy, trying to watch these kids that weren't really doing anything and it would consume me. But this last semester and it drove me crazy, man. So I got rid of a couple kids in my classes and revamped the outline for the week, and it's been freaking phenomenal so far this semester.
You talked about it in there, and I heard you mention it on some other podcasts, and then I also talked to some other guests that started bringing this up. But heart rate monitors, you talked about a cardiovascular day. How far do you think we are away from, in an effort to be more safe, putting heart rate monitors on athletes to find out where they're at and what zone they're in to keep some of these things that have been happening from happening?
Man, if I had the funding right now, I would have heart rate monitors on all my kids, and blast their heart rate up on a big screen. Uh, Polar has a big database where you're able to do that. I need to look in to see how much that is. But I mean, every one of my private clients have heart rate monitors, and it would be phenomenal. I don't know how far away we are, but I mean, if we're using GPS and we're using velocity base in the weight room and we've got lasers, I absolutely think it's possible to have a heart rate monitor for every kid, and I think it would be super beneficial, especially those kids that that don't really know how to pace themselves, or the ones that think they're going all out and their heart rate's not really high at all. Um, I would love that, especially for our low intensity days, especially for those kids that are like, but I feel like I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm like, well, your heart rate's at freaking 170 and you're supposed to be in the 140s right now. So I just need you to slow it down so our heart can get a little more efficient. Uh, I don't know how far away we are, man. I hope it's soon because I think it would be highly beneficial for a lot of athletes and knowing how to teeter on, pushing the limits and pulling back the reins a little bit, especially if a kid's been overloaded. Like I said earlier, the body doesn't know the difference in the type of stress that it's put on it. So monitoring that heart rate would be huge.
I don't know how it would work. I know at the job they brought us out for our first aid kits, the monitors you put on somebody's finger, and it'll tell you beats per minute, heart rate. It gives you everything you need to know for somebody that's having a heart attack or some sort of a medical emergency. I almost wonder how well them would work for sprinters, especially when you're running your max velocity day. Is, hey, you have a few of them, you put them on, your beats per minute's down. Now you run your next one. I don't know if it'd be more efficient than just waiting a certain amount of time or not, but you have those kids that are trying to hit PRs and they're excited and they may be rushing it a little bit, where if they just took an extra minute, it would be there. Now that doesn't go into what we were just discussing, but you could use it for optimal reasons as well.
No, absolutely. And I train our girls soccer team during the summer, and I think there's 4 or 5 of them that have the Polar heart rate monitors. And when we're doing our tempo work, I try to have them link up with other girls. This is a zone that I want you to be in, and kind of tell these other girls to match with them. And when we run our sprints and our sprint repeats during the summer, I tell them we're not running again until we're at least like 60% of our max heart rate, and they love it. Uh, like I said, I wish I could provide a heart rate monitor for every one of my students and just be able to blast their heart rates up there for them to see and track over time. I know that Polar has a database that keeps up with that, where you can see, you're doing the same amount of work that we did at the beginning, but your heart rate is so much lower than it was. We're getting a lot more efficient at, the work, doing more work with less effort.
That has me thinking about a whole new rabbit hole. I'm sorry, but you could put those on athletes and view how they're being coached as well. So if you're too aggressive or you're counterproductive in how you're coaching, or you're having an off day, that heart rate's going to show it. And even though maybe you're not pushing a bunch of conditioning, just the way you're handling yourself is going to affect how your athletes receive that, and then how the performance will be, just on how something is being coached. I don't know if that's something you've ever thought about before or not. That just kind of hit me.
No, you're spot on. Like, just like I said, like the body does not know the difference in the stress that's put on it, whether that's the stress from sprinting or the stress from receiving coaching. Uh, that is a rabbit hole worth going down, because it's just, a totally different perspective on how to coach kids and how they're perceiving, the what you're trying to display to them and where they're at from a heart rate standpoint, whether or not you need to pull back the reins on your tone or how aggressive you are. But no, that's very interesting.
Well, yeah, and you could even take that a step further. If you had them, if a school had them, you could put them on students before they took a test. You would know your
That would
test.
be crazy.
Yeah, you would know your test takers, your not test takers, and then you could evaluate the scores through what their heart rate was. And you open up all these rabbit holes where heart rate, CNS, all that dictates so much of our lives. Well, now you can start getting an inside look on why kids are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's a nice thought process right there.
Well, listening to you talk about it here, I don't know, last week as I was studying for this, opened up some of these ideas. Like, you could figure out how you're coming across the athletes just by what their heart's doing. If you're, in today's day and age of anxiety, it would give you a lot closer look into what is actually creating anxiety.
No, I think you're spot on, man.
Going through all this, we talked about your program, how you set it up, what you're looking at. Problems are always going to occur and plateaus are always going to hit. When you see some athletes that kind of get stuck in a rut, they're running the same program as everybody else, so they're going to start questioning the program. They're going to start questioning everything when they hit those walls. How do you get them past that and get them up to new heights?
Well, I'll have a conversation with them and I'll ask them, are we sleeping? Are we eating what we're supposed to? And 8 or 9 times out of 10, their sleep is trash. They're dealing with either family issues, they're not staying hydrated, they're not eating well. For the most part, that's the root of them not progressing. And not to say that I'm like some wizard of a coach, but at these developmental ages, so much of it depends on their recovery, and that's out of our control. Uh, and also just staying the course. I had a kid that he's my fastest kid right now, but he was our long fly tens. He was at just a one flat, couldn't break a one for, it was like half the year. And I just tell him, hey, take care of your recovery. Like, you're consistently there every week. You're still getting stronger. We're jumping higher. Like, it's going to happen. And now he's running consistently like a 0.94, 0.93. And I use him as an example of these kids that, like, the kid that I'm speaking of, he's like the epitome of my program. Like, he's shown up, he takes care of everything, just a great freaking kid. And I use him as an example all the time. to these other kids that get frustrated when they haven't PR'd in something in like 4 weeks. And I'm like, this kid was at a 1 for almost half a year. And now look at where he's at. I said, and this kid's taking care of everything that he can control. What are you doing? Uh, your sleep is trash. Like, you don't eat very well. Like, once you can start controlling that and getting them to buy in that, like, all right, I do have control over my sleep and what I eat and put in my body. Maybe it's not what we're programming. Maybe it's not the fact that I'm just stagnant in our program. But then they're like, all right, I'm gonna start trying to control the controllables and see what happens. And like I said, 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's their effort and them controlling that recovery on their own. But if it is something I'm doing on my end and we need to change up programming, we'll progress any type of movement. We'll all be doing the same thing in there, but some kids might be like, we'll do Copenhagen planks, for example. Some kids might have their knee on the bench. Some kids might be foot on the bench and out holding. And you might see some kids that are doing the hip dip. It's all a matter of progressing just a basic movement. But as far as like the scheme and the rep schemes and stuff like that, nothing much changes on my end. Just a matter of watching them and, all right, I think you're ready for the next variation of this movement. But like I said, 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's when we deep dive in, it's their sleep is trash. They're not taking care of their body. I can't tell you how many times last week when we're running our slow tempos that a kid was like, "Can I have some water?" And I'm like, "Man, if you're thirsty by the time we're doing this slow tempo work, like, you're already dehydrated. Like, you need to do a better job of staying on your water intake. Yes, you can have some water, but like, just do better."
Well, nothing makes a coach question his program or her program more than plateaus. So usually when an athlete is plateauing, you as a coach have been through every aspect of it, trying to find out if there is something wrong on your end. So that if you can't see it obviously, then there's a deduction that, hey, let's look at these other metrics, see if that's that, and then we'll go from there.
No, 100%. And like the kid that I speak of, like, I had a conversation with him. I mean, it seemed like probably 4 months he was stuck at just a 1. And so I was like, "Hey man, I just want to pick your brain. Like, do you think we need to change some stuff up? Do you think that we need to do something different programming wise?" And he was like, "No." He's like, he's like you said, I'm jumping higher. I'm getting stronger in the weight room. He's like, "I just think we need to keep doing what we're doing." So I think from a coach, just putting your ego aside, having a conversation with that athlete and being willing to come up with something for that specific athlete if we are hitting a plateau. Uh, and the great thing about being in the school system is, like, you got natural deload weeks. So I don't ever have a deload week. Now I might minimize volume like that last week of finals, just so we're not in there the whole time, and a little bit of uh, easing a little bit of the tension on their brain if they've got 5 tests outside of my class that day. But I don't schedule deload weeks because there's a break at the end of every 9 weeks. And it is beautiful coming back from some of those breaks, that how refreshed some of these kids are. And maybe not PRs that first week back, but that second week, and they're like, "Dang, I didn't really do anything." I'm like, that's the whole point. Like, you're not going to lose very much from a week off or even 2 weeks, especially if you're still like going and doing active things. So I don't deload much, and I haven't dealt with a lot of plateaus at in my space, just because so much of them are developing still. But I think to answer your question is just have a conversation and put the coaching ego aside and have that conversation with your athlete on, all right, what do you think we need to do next? What's working? What's not working?
How many plateaus do you think are mental barriers as well? It seems like when you're watching athletes, we'll take a male, for example, like that 225 bench press, you know, that's one. And then when they get past that, it seems like 315 is the next. The squat, it's 405, and they'll get stuck there for a while. Like their brain won't let them go past that. 30-inch vertical, one flying 10. How much of that is just time for the mental side of it to catch up with where they're at and know that they can break those barriers?
I mean, I think I'd say 90 to 95% of that is a mental block in their head. Because once, like you said, once they hit that, it's just like they don't remember not being able to get it. It's just establishing a new baseline for them and reassuring, like, hey, like you've got it. It's there. Like just keep showing up and like hammering that because you're gonna break through that, and then it's gonna be one of those points where you're like, I don't remember not being able to get that. Uh, I think that's a lot where discipline and persistence comes in. Like, keep showing up and hammering what you're doing.
To me, that's also why keeping records are so important too, because you'll get those kids that get stuck there and they get hung there, and I'm not making any progress. And for here, we keep books. I'm sure all yours is electronic. Well, hey, let's look back at your stuff.
Yeah.
A year ago, you were doing this. 6 months ago, you were doing this. You're right
Absolutely.
there. You're close. Just stick with me a little bit longer.
And especially from our sprint work, and like I tell them, like, yeah, like this is your PR, but when you look back, like your average is this, and you're still getting better than your average, which means like our average is getting better. You're getting more consistent, so you don't compare yourself to the most points you've ever scored in a basketball game. That's why you keep up with your average. So just reminding them that, all right, we're still within 95% of our best, and we're doing better than our average. Like you're just getting more consistent, and like you're there. So the PR is going to come. We're not going to compare ourselves to our PR, but you're beating your average every week, and just means you're raising the floor just a little bit.
And every PR gets harder by nature.
Yeah.
And eventually,
It's like,
it's something that you're going to have to invest some time in.
yeah. At that point, it's just technical and executing and making sure every aspect of whether it's a lift or a sprint or a jump, every aspect almost has to be damn near perfect. And I want to be like, well, that's your own fault for like setting the bar so high. Like now there's fewer instances where like you can have errors. So you're just going to have to hone in, and you're just going to have to focus a little more on the technical side, especially when we're doing our homework instead of the actual test.
Now, what KPIs are you looking at? I think listening to you talk, you've narrowed some of that in from originally. What are the main indicators you're looking for or tracking?
So what we track, we keep up with our long fly tens, which is I give them their lead in. They can it'll be 20 to 30-yard lead in for some. Some of my bigger kids, it's probably a 20-yard lead in, just because they'll lose speed by if I make them start 30 yards back. We keep up with a 5 to 10 fly. We have a reactive strength index, our 4 jump test on the jump mat. We've got vertical. We keep up with broad jump. We keep up with a med ball slam that we measure with the output unit. We keep up with our 5 to 10 5 pro agility. What else do we keep up with? And then we use some of those to convert into momentum for my bigger kids. Well, not bigger, they're just way more, but they're able to move well. And then we use a power index off the vertical that takes into account their weight. Those are, I think there's 8 or 9 of them that we keep up, that we track. I don't keep up with any weight room numbers. Shame on me, I know. But for the most part, if those kids are getting stronger in the weight room, a lot of those KPIs are going to get better, especially at this level.
Now, with your different sprints and your different lead ins, is that paired with your lower body movement that day? So let's say a longer lead in will be paired with a heavier squat, or a short lead in, a 5-10 would be paired with a more dynamic squat. Are you looking at those in conjunction with each other, or are they total separate entities?
I don't really look at those in a conjunction. I do my long fly tens, and then we go in and we do our squats. Uh, I don't get crazy intricate at this level with that because one, it drove me crazy whenever I did, and I didn't find that it really mattered that much with my high school athletes. Uh, the longer fly tens are going to be a lot more hamstring oriented, especially once we're getting to top speed. So I try to hit the opposite with our squats, and then our short fly tens on Wednesday. We go in there and we hit our RDLs since we've kind of hit those hamstrings pretty hard with our sprints on Monday. And we'll do some intense plyometrics, intensive jumps, not plyometrics. We'll have our jumps paired with squats. We'll go in there and squat, and then directly after that, I have them hit a broad jump. Now that doesn't match up with the dynamics. Broad jumps more acceleration. And then RDL, after RDLs, I have them do seated dumbbell jumps, which is a vertical integration, doesn't line up with our acceleration base. But what I found, it doesn't factor into that much of what we're doing, and we're still making quality gains and moving the needle, regardless of lining up those vector forces, whether, vertical jumps and top speed and horizontal jumps and acceleration based type stuff.
That's what I was wondering. Listening to you talk about how you paired some of that up, I wondered how you were deciding the order and what you wanted to do.
No, it hasn't. There was a time when it did, and I made sure that, if we're sprinting long, then I want our jumps to be vertical. But no, when we go to the weight room, it's a matter of logistics uh, and what we can do by the time we're in the weight room uh, to get our intensive jumps in. Um, when we do our RDLs on Wednesday, the reason that I do seated dumbbell jumps is because we line up all of our benches in the middle of the room, and it's what we got space for. And we do Copenhagen planks for our accessory work that day, so it works best for what we have logistically on that day. And like I said, I don't drive myself crazy over stuff like that anymore.
Your seated dumbbell jumps, is that based on the dumbbells? Is that based on their squat? How do you decide what size dumbbell they should jump with?
I want them to still be explosive. And that's what I tell them. I could get nitpicky with it, like what your squat is, and go a percentage off of that. I could have them do a percentage, like say your max vertical is 30. I want you to have dumbbells in your hands that you can only jump 70% of that. Uh, but all that takes time, and it's going to take away from the actual training. So I tell them, I still want you to be explosive. I don't want it to feel like these dumbbells are weighing you down. So whether that's 5 pounds in each hand or 10, like there are some kids that I'll look and I can tell that they're moving really slow with the dumbbells, and I'll tell them, like, you need to go down. Like, it should be just enough that you don't feel like you're getting weighed down, because I still want you to be explosive with them. Because even 5 pounds in each hand is an extra 10 pounds added to you, and it's going to make a difference. So like I said, I could get nitpicky like that, but having access to the dumbbells and all the kids, like, I don't. I just tell them I still want them to be explosive with it. Take away the stretch shortening cycle, put force in that ground, and redirect it up. And if we're moving slow with what we got in our hands, we need to go lower than that. Because when they get outside of my class and they're not playing sports, they're not going to have all this tech and all this data. And like I said, I want them to be able to take care of themselves after they're done with my class and after they're out of high school.
Now, with this dumbbell seated jump, are you seeing verticals increase because of that, or are you seeing a better power output? What landed you on the seated jump?
I just like that it takes the stretch shortening cycle out of it. I have them do a little rock back. It kind of, from a neurological standpoint, helps some of these kids that struggle with that counter movement jump. It helps re-ingrain that what that jump should feel like and what their body movement should feel like. Uh, so far, we've been doing it. We've been doing it this semester, and I'd say probably 65 to 70% of my students, when we've been measuring our vertical, their verticals have gotten higher. So whether that's from the seated jumps or them just getting stronger or them just getting better from a movement standpoint, I don't know. But I mean, they're doing something right. Maybe I'm doing something right. Who knows?
It seems like that would pair really good with a pin press, a heavy pin press.
Absolutely.
Jump. You could create something really good there in a peaking cycle.
Absolutely.
Now I'll hit you with a few more. I've had you on here a while, and it's been a crazy morning. For whatever reason, my Zoom didn't work very well on my other computer, so we're making it work on my tablet, which I do appreciate. But the one thing I heard you talk about that I've tried to mimic, I don't know how well I've done, but I've tried, is using social media to show off your athletes to create a better experience for them. The importance of social media, especially in a small environment. Once you added that, did you see a change?
With my students.
Yes.
Yeah, they like to joke about put me on that weekly recap or over here, coach, let me get that. And it is, I used to do the weekly recap. I've gotten away from it. I've started putting what we're doing in our class, just to kind of, I don't know, help coaches out. That I know whenever I was coming up and I was new to like how to run this weight room for 40 kids, I liked seeing what other coaches that were in a similar situation to me were doing. So I did the weekly recap where I would just record and kind of just put everything we did in a recap video at the end of the week. And I've kind of moved towards, recording each day what we're doing in class and putting it on there. And I think it's helped some coaches, hopefully, that are new to the game, help them out. And it's still getting that buy-in from my students when they see me out with my phone, like, coach, let me get that. Let me show off. But I think for the most part, like, athlete students want you to be proud of them. So when they see that you're recording them, that they know that, all right, maybe I'm doing this right and I'm doing a movement pattern right, and coach is proud of me. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it definitely helped knowing that I was spotlighting them and highlighting them, to be on that Twitter, as they say. Put me on that Twitter. Put me on that Twitter, coach.
I think it drives consistency here, because the question will come up, well, why is it always this kid, or why is it always that kid? Well, it's always that kid because that kid's always here.
Kid's always here. The kid's doing the work.
I can't film you if you're not here.
Do you want me to put you on blast with your terrible movement patterns that you never like try to get better at? Because I will, if that's what you want.
The one thing cool I've seen about it, and we've just started using this because kids have been here 3-4 years, is we can go back and look when they first came, and it's like, that was you.
Yeah.
Look at where we're at now. I don't know that every video I put on is a gym, but it's a recorded historical event that we can go back and look and be like, okay, here on top of your book showing you progress, let's look at these videos and let's see progress.
Video proof that you've come a long freaking way. I remember posting one of the videos probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, and someone commented, these kids have better movement patterns than most adults. My light's going out. But I'm like, I remember commenting, like, not all of my students look like that. Like, some of these kids I've had for 4 years. So like, if they're not moving better, that's on them. But for the most part, it's amazing looking back at, where they were as a freshman to like how great their movement quality is now. It makes me a proud coach.
Yes, and you can see how you've grown as a coach, how they've grown as an athlete, how you view movements, how your program's changed. It's it's good for a lot of things other than just spotlighting your kids. It does provide a record of what you've learned, what they've learned, and how you've changed.
Absolutely so. Absolutely.
I'll hit you with one last one, and then I'll let you enjoy your day. I know you've been gracious to be on here as long as you have, so I'll
Oh
try.
man, I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we talk to a few of the same people, and we talk to them quite a bit in chat, text, via Instagram, or however the case may be. But you've set up some really big group chats. How difficult is that to get set up and kind of keep heading in the right direction?
It wasn't too difficult. So I'm the director here in Kentucky. And I wanted a way to connect with all the coaches that are in Kentucky. So we started a WhatsApp group message that, it's just some days there may be not anything said in that group, but I feel like we've had some coaches that have just joined that even me, like there'll be a coach ask a question and it may not be anything about, movement or exercise. It might be, hey, what kind of racks are you guys using for iPads? What are we doing here? And I think it's been a big help for our coaches here in Kentucky. Uh, it wasn't too difficult to set up, had to make sure all the old heads knew how to run some technology as far as anything that's not text message. I think once you get more than 20 guys or 20 people on a thread that you're not able to have a message as far as iMessage. So we went through WhatsApp on that and it's been great as far as learning different things, reaching out to coaches and just having that open forum. And as far as I don't know, give me a second. Let me turn these lights off. There we go. Uh, as far as my other group message, it's been the other coaches that have kind of put it together. Ross is the one that kind of got the big group message. I'm in with him and a lot of other great coaches. But that's been one of my go-tos as far as bouncing ideas off. It's great to have, the feedback, honest feedback, and just a lot of silly banter back and forth. I'm grateful for all the group chats that I'm a part of because they've helped me as a coach and just as being a good dude.
Yeah, anytime you can bounce some ideas off people, it's going to be good because then somebody somewhere has some experience with it and they can tell you the pitfalls they found, the benefits. Uh, you can kind of use their knowledge to streamline the process, yeah, to create.
And it's reassurance, when you asking questions and they're like, well, no, that's what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'm not a freaking idiot like I thought I was. If you guys are doing it, then that's reassurance that I'm at least on the right track.
That there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
We all want to come up with new ideas that are groundbreaking, but at the end of the day, we need to have things that are working well.
No, and that's right. Just that reassurance that you're headed in the right direction. And like I said, that I'm not an idiot for the most part.
Well, listening to you today, I wouldn't know why anybody would think you were an idiot. So,
well, you see my yearbook pictures, man.
I was going to hit you with that, and then I forgot. I didn't even add it as a question. But yeah, when I started researching you, first thing that come up was your picture from your high school where you're teaching.
Yeah.
I guess you don't take them super serious.
No, man, life's too short to be taking yearbook photos seriously. And my superintendent, my principal are big fans of it, so I got to teach my kids to just let loose and be silly. And those yearbook photos are pretty those are pretty rough. I remember you sending that message saying, "Is this you?" I was like, "Oh my gosh." I didn't know that was actually on our district site, but I'm glad to know that it is now.
I would urge anybody to look up Tyler Franklin at Murray High School and check out the picture they have for him. It's well worth the few minutes it takes to find.
Yeah,
well,
great.
Coach, I appreciate all your time this morning working through a few issues. It seems like tech eludes me more than it doesn't. But hopefully this all turns out well and we can get this out there so people can listen to it.
I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a great conversation and great getting to finally, I guess in person have this communication back and forth. I appreciate you reaching out too.
Well, no problem, man. Thanks for making time and working through all the questions with me.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure, Stephen.
All right. Well, have a wonderful day.
You too, man.